Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years. Pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world.
Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. This week on the podcast is Jay Brown coming in hot, discussing some of the pros and cons of AI and tech in yoga. Now, I think Jay's thoughts represent a lot of us in the yoga space. We love the deep connections that we have together when we practice yoga. We're skeptical about the benefits that people can get from AI's use, and also wonder how it can help us. So Jay and I got started talking about this topic via email a while ago, and quickly I thought he would be the perfect guest to ask about all of it. But before we get started in the interview, I do have a couple of things for you this week. First, if you could please throw like a virtual Cheez-It at the algorithm toddlers and go ahead and like or subscribe to the podcast from wherever you're listening, that helps us get more folks like you around the water cooler for discussion. And if you love our content, it would be so rad if you left us a 5-star review. I see some of y'all have even left messages on some of the platforms for me, and I cannot express how much that means. I felt so lonely in this job for so long, and it is really lovely to connect with new friends from all over the world. Next, I have a new thing that I'm launching through the podcast. This summer, I'm hosting a virtual book club, and I would love to invite you. I partnered with my good friend and former podcast guest, Coley Sanders, for a 6-week book group series. Now, Khalees is a university professor, and she talks about issues that we bucket under the umbrella of DEIA. And she came to me with a book that I just absolutely knew would be perfect for us in the yoga space. The book is Hey Hun, Sales, Sisterhood, Supremacy, and Other Lies Behind Multi-Level Marketing by Emily Lynn Paulson. We need to admit that a lot of what happens in the yoga space holds similar energy to MLMs, and in fact, it is incredibly normal for a lot of yoga spaces to also be selling everything from essential oils to pans to foodstuff to supplements that are set up in an MLM style. There are some reasons for that, and Khalees and I are going to hold your hands gently so that we can unpack it with you. There will be some yoga led by me and discussion led by Khalees. And honestly, you should join us. The link to it is in the show notes. But until we get started on that book chat this summer, let's listen now to my talk with Jay Brown on AI and tech in yoga. Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. Okay, this week on the podcast, I have my friend Jay Brown, who is also a fellow podcaster, on with me. And I have to say, Jay, you and I feel like we became friends over this conversation about AI and tech. So will you tell everybody who you are and what you do, and then we're going to get into it.
Sure. My name is Jay Brown, and I'm a yoga teacher, and I started teaching in the early 90s in New York, and then I had a yoga center in Brooklyn from 2007 to 2017. I started my podcast, Jay Brown Yoga Talks, in 2015. I was an early adopter of some tech stuff, like the early blogosphere days, and then, producing online content and whatnot, even in the early social media days too. So I've sort of had often say I'm a bit of a bridge generation, like 1 foot before the internet and 1 foot after the internet. I think I was like the last generation to come into yoga before the internet.
You and the
And
same age. I feel like we're the same age. I'm
maybe
46. I'm solidly X.
me too, 52,
Okay. Okay.
1972, born 1972. So yeah, exactly.
Nice.
And then, I let go of the center in 2017 and I traveled around. I was sort of like on the international circuit for a couple years. And then, the world fell apart and everything's been online. So I was already set up for that, but I've been sort of holding it down since. And now I just opened my own center, as we discussed on my show here in Easton, Pennsylvania, about
Yeah.
4 months ago. And other than that, I guess I've just sort of been kind of around in the yoga world for a lot of years, and I've always wanted to have conversations with folks. First, it was blog writing, and then it was the podcast. So I think, yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing, and I guess who I am, if that answers your question.
Does, and I feel like I want you to give yourself more credit because you were for real like the first on the market, especially in the podcasting space. Like, dude, we all listened to you back in the day. If you were in the industry in the teens, especially the late teens, we were all listening. Like, you were one of the first, if not
Well,
the first. Who else was there?
Well, thanks for that. I mean, there were a few others who kind of started aroundish the same time as me, but they're not still doing it as regularly as I am. So I will take that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I definitely, like I said, was an early adopter. And the podcast, certainly, there was a time also where when the yoga world was different than it was now, I think it really was a kind of tapped into a lot of things that were kind of going on and people were listening to it for that. Um,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, that's an interesting thought that I want to pull on because right like because tech kind of does that for us. It gives us this like wild accessibility for us to be able to share our thoughts and ideas with other people, which like I'm I was just editing a podcast I did with Jeevan Heyman, and like Jeevan and I were talking about organizing and social activism, which is like a big kink for the both of us. And I was like, tech does this for us. Like it helps. And I think you're exactly right. Like you were doing that, blogging first and then podcasting. Like, do you feel like that was part of why you got into tech was to kind of connect with other people and share ideas?
I mean, I got into tech because that was where everything was going.
But
Like,
not everybody saw that.
I
Not
know, no,
everybody
I didn't
saw.
see it. I had a person in my life. His name's Josh Citron. We worked together for a long time. We've since parted ways, but we worked together for many years. And he was a independent producer and a musician, and he saw it, and he was the one who told me that you need to start doing your classes online. You just set up your laptop in the back there and you charge people a subscription rate. He was the one who told me that. And I fought with him about it. And I was like, yoga's in person and blah, blah, blah. I was like totally
Yeah.
Luddite and anti it. But he did convince me because he said, listen, Jay, you've spent 10 years making all these relationships and connections to all these people at this center. And you're not going to renew the lease because you can't afford it anymore because the place just got gentrified beyond my ability to keep pace.
Yeah.
And he said, if you do this, then these people would have a way to connect with you wherever you are. You can literally do classes from your living room. And so I relented, and he was definitely right. I have people who are still coming to my
Awesome.
online classes from who started in 2015 or 2016. So he was right about that. And I did embrace it. And, even in the early like social media days, I embraced a lot of that too. However, and this is why you and I
Yeah.
maybe are not in total agreement in terms of like the pros and cons of AI. And again, I'm not anti technology at all. That's why I'm saying all this. But at some point, I do think the internet changed. You know, I used to have somebody who was kind of like my internet guru guy. His name was Douglas Rushkoff. I did have him on my podcast a long while back. He's written a couple of books, but one of them was called Program or Be Programmed. And another one was called Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus. And it was a lot about the way that like tech is being incorporated into our lives and sort of like in ways that might not be altogether healthy. And also, it was about how the internet initially was this promise of like reaching the world. And in some ways, it does have that capacity, which is what you're kind of pointing to and asking about. But at the same time, over eventually, and he writes about this, like they did figure out a way to monetize it and kind of control the space in ways that it didn't used to be. And people who had early Instagram accounts and were able to gain like lots and lots of followers until the algorithm got switched. And then now it's sort
Yeah.
of like impossible. And there's all these kind of gates that you never get there anymore. So as time went on, and he used to say this, and this is kind of what I've been coming back to. He said, they took over the online space. Like the free space isn't as free as it used to be, but they left the real world behind. So, I mean, so
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm coming from a little bit now. I guess more specifically to your question, and maybe I'm getting ahead of us about the AI and using AI.
Yeah.
I think that I can imagine, and there's potential uses for this technology for like to help people with some of their admin stuff. And I
Totally.
think that there's some potential use for that. And again, I'm not against using, although I haven't used it at all. Like I have no chat GBT account. I'm not using, I haven't had a need for it.
You
Now,
have a studio. Oh my gosh.
well, right now, my studio, literally, it's $15 per person per class. Cash, Venmo, PayPal, or credit card. I have no admin. I don't need a sign-in sheet.
Okay.
I have no admin. See, I've
Are
gone
people like putting cash in a Kleenex box like we used to? And then like, stop it.
cigar box
Stop.
with cash. Not kidding.
I mean, I love
But
that though, because it is so 90s. Like, what if you were in yoga in the 90s? There was some random ass box that was in somebody's basement that they put, and then they were like, here, shove your $10 in here. And that was how we paid.
and look, I know how to set up a software and do the other
Yeah.
thing. I had the center and I know how to do all that. But I don't know if it's necessary. I don't know if I would be making any money or the people would be having a better experience. And
Yeah.
you know what it sort of set me off a little bit when our email exchange happened is you had that episode, which is a great episode, by the way, where you were talking, I can't remember the guest's name, but you guys were talking
Phoebe.
about organizations, and it was the first time I heard someone say we should use AI to help administer it. We could use AI. And someone, your guest said, yeah, AI is the future, so we should just embrace it. And I was like, no, like some deep part of me was like, I don't think we should embrace it. Now, there's two reasons, why I think
Yeah.
I have that reaction. One of them
Okay.
is much a totally like pragmatic reason, which is that in my life, there's kind of been a few areas where I've seen a process switch over to like using an algorithm instead of people.
Yeah.
One of them is the health insurance application that I have to put in every year for my kids. Because of
Yep.
my income level and the state that I'm in, I mean, this was true when I was in New York and in Pennsylvania. My kids get often health insurance through state programs, whether it's CHIP or some states do it through Medicaid.
Yep.
And you have to apply every year. And in New York, they did a great job, I got to say. They had great programs. In Pennsylvania, they did a reasonably good job. When I first got here, it was pretty much the same thing. But in the last few years, they switched it over. And it used to be that you filed your application online, and there was somebody in the office who looked at it and did like the initial thing. And they were a real person, and you could actually call and talk to them, and they could fix something if there was something that wasn't right.
Yeah.
But then they switched it. So the initial layer is an algorithm that does it, not a person checking it. And so the last 2 years, the same application I've been putting in for the last 5 to 7 years got denied both times. And then when I did get somebody on the phone and explained to them, they said, oh, yeah, this is an administrative error. And the reason why is because the algorithm doesn't know how to read my application because I'm a freak, because I'm a self-employed yoga instructor. And the algorithm doesn't know how to read my Schedule C tax returns and understand what my actual taxable income is compared to the revenue that comes in. So there's that. So I kind of have had to like really come up against a dehumanization of what was already a somewhat dehumanizing process, honestly. And then the other part of it is, and I'm kind of joking about it, but kind of not, there is kind of a spiritual component to it. Like the idea that we're gonna like just embrace this future of AI taking over. Like if you take the time to read people like Ray Kurzweil and like the transhumanists who are literally behind these technologies, and you read what the people who program AI say about what they're doing, it's insane. They talk about it
Yes.
in the craziest way about opening up portals and demons and all kinds of crazy. These people are crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong there. One of the conversations that's happening on this series, I have my friend Mandy King coming on, and she said something that blew me away. And she was like, "Oh yeah, if AI is created by humans and humans have samskaras, AI has samskaras."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Shut the front door, Mandy." And then like we pulled into like a whole hour philosophical conversation about AI. I mean, it's like a fascinating conversation about like the ethics and the philosophy behind us using this tech. But I do have to say, Jay, I agree with your friend. It's here and it's like we can have ethical qualms with it, but I do still think we have to have the discussion about how we protect our jobs because it can take them.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I got in the mail maybe 2 days ago from like my health insurance company a thing that was like, we'll give you your own private, like physical therapist, holistic health practitioner online, like an online service through your health
Yeah,
insurance company.
yeah,
Of course, it was totally weird and corporate and not at all what you would get from an actual yoga teacher or yoga therapist or something and going to be with a person in the room with them.
yeah.
So
I
I don't
mean,
know. I
my
don't know that our jobs are like at risk. If our jobs exist online, maybe.
I mean, but hear me out, right?
Okay.
Like I was talking to actually another yoga professional. She's a yoga therapist. Adana Mack is her name, and she actually is a PA in the military and a yoga therapist within the military. And so Adana and I were talking about this, and Adana was like, I think we need to talk about how medicine will change. AI will be diagnosing you, giving you subscription or prescriptions, and telling you what's wrong with you. And you will literally never interact with a person. And she was like, if AI can take medical professionals' jobs, there's no reason to believe that AI can't, to some degree, take ours too.
But here's the thing. I think I just was listening to somebody talk about this like AI advancement in medicine, specifically around breast cancer and treating
Okay.
breast cancer. And my mom had breast cancer, and ultimately that led to her having leukemia. So it's just something that's been in my life when I was a kid, breast cancer. So I heard this thing, there's like a 30% or whatever like failure rate to the surgery sometimes, like they don't get it all or they can't tell while they're doing the surgery if they got it all, so they have to do the thing later and send it in for a test and find out if they got it all, and then if they didn't get it all they have to go back in and do another surgery. Well, now there's this like AI tech that they can have in the room where it would literally take the 30% failure rate to like a less than 1% failure rate, because the doctor can have the AI take a picture while they're doing the surgery and get in like
Damn.
instant assessment about whether or not he got it all or not. So like for that, I'm like, okay, that you make the
Yeah,
case.
feels
I'm
good.
with you. Use it. It sounds like a great technology. Now, however, like the idea that you're going to give over like what was a human interaction, particularly around like interpersonal engagement, to like a chatbot, like a language model chatbot, that's where it gets weird. Like I remember I had a, what was it called? I took this linguistics class and it was specifically about this. It was from a long while ago where they were first having like computer programs that would simulate like a psychologist. And someone who was behind the technology saw his secretary using it, and then he was looking at what she had put in there, and then she got upset. She's like, "You're looking, that's like," and he was like, he realized that she was treating it like a real therapist. And it was like an issue that when you start to kind of mix what would want to be reserved for like a human interaction for one reason or another, and we could come up with lots of different reasons, but you take that and you outsource that because we've outsourced a
Yeah.
lot of things. Nobody
Everything.
looks at a
Yeah, we
map
have.
anymore. We all
Yeah.
got the GPS. I had to force myself to not use the GPS when I first moved here so that I could drive around and know what the streets were around my house. I just thought
Yeah.
it's crazy that I don't know. I would feel like I could get lost within a mile of my house
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm always using a GPS. Like that's crazy. We outsource so much. So again, like I'm not saying don't use it, but there's a boundary that I feel like needs to get set at some point. And it doesn't, some people are advocating for no boundary.
Okay, I agree with you 100% on that for two reasons. One, I'm thinking of a new friend. I am actually going through a business course right now to expand my business through Goldman Sachs. And like somebody who's in this business course with me, she runs a company and she's recently divorced and she uses ChatGPT sort of to like chat about relationships and chat about like interpersonal connections and things like that. And I was like, babe, I need you to just find like I but her argument is it's safer for me to have that interaction than as a woman to go out on an app or to meet somebody and then go out with friends. And I was like, oh, but you make a good point about the safety issues of that. But in the end, I don't think ChatGPT will make you less lonely. I don't think it's going to make us less lonely.
No, I think most of us have been recalibrating our relationship to Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
I just, before the pandemic, I think it was probably about 60-40, 60% in person, 40% online. And then for a while, it kind of moved to about 50-50. And then during the pandemic, it went 100% online.
Yeah. Yep.
And then at some point, I literally saw myself like pull back and saw myself sitting in a room by myself with my laptop. And I was like, oh my God, I'm literally in a Black Mirror episode.
I mean, but at the same time, haven't you made friends online? Like
Yes,
I have made great
yes,
friends
it's a
who have,
paradox.
yeah,
I've made
right?
friends. I've managed to make a living. I've have the
Yeah,
podcast, which enriches me in so many ways, my
yeah,
learning and friendships. Yes, to all of that. I think within the technology, there's been a lot of good. Again, I'm not trying to throw everything out, but there's been a kind of an excess or a kind of backlash.
yeah, yeah. I don't disagree with that either. Okay, let me ask you this.
Go
Let's
ahead.
talk about tech and AI in regards to how yoga professionals work for the next, let's forecast a little bit in the future. I
Mhm.
think I emailed you the Furby story, which if you're listening to the series, I've told the Furby story 1,000 times, but my daughter has a toy that's a Furby. You can say, hey, Furby, chill time. And Furby leads you through gentle stretching, light breathing, and positive affirmations. And it's not bad. Like legitimately in all objective terms, I would hire a Furby at my studio. So I was like, there's a point where we have to acknowledge that some of the things that we spent so much time focusing on getting better at, quote unquote, getting better at, your sequencing, your alignment, your like, verbal cueing, AI can do that already, and they put it in a toy.
Yeah, but no, I'm going to take issue with that. And I'll take issue
Okay,
with it in this way
perfect.
because, yes, in the same way that you can have a script that Bikram wrote and
Yes.
everybody can learn the script and say the same words, and do the same poses in the same order. But those classes aren't all the same. We've all seen, you can have the same
Okay.
uh, Ashtanga series or different sequence of asana taught by two different teachers, and you'll get a completely different experience depending on who's teaching it. That
Great point.
that the forms are only some kind of container. So the strict ability to just kind of reproduce what other people have done, because that's what these language models do,
Yeah.
it doesn't also have whatever the subtle aspect, the subtle, unexplainable, uh, intuitive process or exchange that happens between people doesn't have that.
Okay,
Even
riddle me this. Oh,
okay, go
go.
ahead.
You go, and
I
then
was
I'm
going to say
gonna.
even in the sense of like using Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
I'm good at it at this point. I feel like I've done it a lot. I feel like I can connect with people through them, but you can't, it isn't, you lose a whole bunch. Now that I'm actually having a whole bunch more like in-person people showing up, it's pretty obvious. That's what I meant. I think a lot of us are recalibrating my relationship to like my online stuff and then
Yeah.
my real world life and how those two things interact, you know?
Okay, so here's my question to you. You have kids, I have kids. My kids are 16 and 11, so right, they're of a generation, Gen Z sort of early Gen Alpha for my daughter. Um, I sometimes feel like the conversations we have around this topic are so solidly Gen X and older millennial conversations because without even thinking about it, we have anchored and calibrated our kids' nervous systems in tech since they were like infants. Like, I did not do this, but I know so many of my friends that you would go out to dinner, right? And you would give your kids like tech, like an iPad to like play on. So they were like not a mess in public. And I get it, like parents going like, oh my God, I want you to behave. We want to pretend kids don't exist. But now those kids are 16, 17, 18, 20 years old, and we're asking them to have a better relationship with humans than with the tech they've regulated their nervous systems off of since infancy. Like, I don't think that's how this is going to go. I just
Well,
don't.
Well, I certainly appreciate the question. I have a 15-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old daughter. So I'm
Lineage?
right there with you. We had done a pretty good job of setting boundaries around the tech until the pandemic, and then the
Yep.
schools all gave them their own
Yep.
iPads, and
Yep.
it was forget about it. And it's been an uphill battle ever since. Now, we resisted giving my eldest daughter a cell phone until I believe she was almost 14. All of her other friends had had them since an early
Same.
age. We didn't let her have the social media apps until she got to high school. And she was literally got up in front of us and like did like a PowerPoint presentation about all the things that she was missing out on because we wouldn't let her have TikTok. And she was made a convincing argument because the
Yeah.
school musical and the clubs and everybody was using it as their forum of where they were communicating and congregating. So we let her
Yeah.
have them. But as soon as we did, we literally saw it happen. Like it's pretty depressing, actually.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to your question though, like my eldest daughter also is excelling so far in school. She has great grades in AP classes, and she does use ChatGPT and she knows how to use it in ways that I don't. So you're absolutely right. I'm like a total Gen Xer, and the way that I'm talking about it is not the way that she's talking about it. So I do think they have a different relationship to it. But here's the thing. She's looking at me. They're looking at us to see what they should make of all this. You know, and yes, she does that thing of, oh, you're just a boomer and you don't know or whatever. But the truth is, we're modeling something for them. So
Yeah.
I see a lot of parents who just haven't even considered it or didn't think twice or didn't see that movie that they put out about what it does to our kids. Some of us saw that movie and some of
Yeah.
us didn't see the movie. I can't remember what the name of it was, but you know what I'm talking about because I could see your
I
face.
do. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
movie that came out, we saw it, but some of the parents around me, think anything of it. But I do think that, I don't know, again, I acknowledge that their relationship's going to be different than mine. But I do think it is about boundary setting. And the idea that this technology is limitless and it's going to open you up to the world and you can be anything you want because of this technology, I'm calling bullshit on that.
I'd, I mean, I think you made your argument in a way that I would agree with you on that. I do think, though, we have to consider what it means for us, especially in the yoga space, because I do feel like there are a lot of folks that have rose-colored glasses about this, and
Okay,
that, well,
well,
transmission happens person to person, it'll never change us. I don't think that's true.
well, what do you mean by that? Like, oh, you think that we can embrace the technology because it's still person to person and
Exactly.
that'll be more than the technology. Well, I guess it remains to be seen, but I don't know. Again, for me, it's about direction, like the direction things are going in. And I've seen this trajectory that we've seemed to be going on societally,
Yeah.
which to me is what I consider to be a very anti-human direction. Like the idea that there's going to be this singularity and that whatever Elon's got brain chips and all this like and that's going to be the expansion of our consciousness or whatever, which is what it is tied into. That's what I think people don't always get. It's like this convenient thing, but also
Yeah.
often ends up having a surveillance component and a potential control over us. And so again, it's like this mixed bag. So there's these trade-offs, and we have to kind of decide. I mean, I'm really curious. You're asking like what it means to the yoga. Well, what are yoga teachers using AI for right now? How are they using it to plan their classes?
I do think some of them are, and I've talked to a few people who are using it like the way I would use it, which is like a springboard prompt. Like if you're a journaler, that would be like the journaling terminology is that, you go, hey, Chat GPT, you look cute today. I'm trying to build a class around this topic. I would like some ideas. And ChatGPT says, hey, babe, you also look cute. Here are my 10 ideas. And from there, you can lift that up and sort of build a class around the ideas, right? Now, and I'm going to say this saying most of the people I know who are telling me they're doing this have not been in industry as long as either of us have been.
Mm.
Because I said, I made a joke and I said, I want to time out how long it would take Chat GPT to build a class and see how close I would be. And I guarantee you I could give it a good shot because I've taught like 18,000 hours of yoga classes at this point. I should be able to give it a run for its money. So, like when you're newer, I think the newer teachers out there are thinking about it as like a journal prompt or, you know, you
See,
know what I'm saying?
I do. I mean, but that's a good example of like where I think the kind of efficiency thing it has a backlash because if
Okay.
we don't have chat gpt how do we come up with them? We sit and we stare off out the window while we drink a tea and we
Yes.
visualize, or maybe we put a mat down and we do a few things and we see what it feels like, and we have this whole like more drawn out, less like immediate gratification process of, oh, I think I'll teach that today, or whatever it's coming from, as opposed to it involving interacting with a screen. I think for me, I've just become really sensitive to screens and the amount of time. Like I saw this infographic recently, and it was like the percentage of what people spend their time on since before the internet and up until now. I can't remember what the year span was, but it was like family, church, friends, and then down at the bottom initially was zero online. And you can see as soon as the internet hit, it goes,
Yeah.
and now
Yep.
it's like
Yeah.
60, over 60% online, friends and families like in the tens.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, to me, I feel like an impulse, a strong impulse that feels aligned with what yoga has taught me about life and the nature of my existence, to set more of a boundary So I've done a whole range of things in terms of like when the devices get left downstairs and no devices where we're sleeping, and kind of like
Yeah.
just kind of like trying to set some rituals and boundaries around them more than I did for a while, where it was just like you let yourself, you could just be on all the time. And in Ayurveda, they talk about like all the things that go in, all the input that is into your system. So just getting sensitive to that and recognizing my own screen addiction
Yeah.
and wanting to say, oh wow, this is one area that I don't have control. I don't have good boundaries. Like I've worked so hard to kind of be able to self-regulate in all these different ways, but this one way, and it's sticky because it's how I make my living, I'm working. It's my job.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Here's what I want to say. I proved it to myself that almost all of what I was doing on social media wasn't making me more money.
Ooh.
So
Say more.
initially, I was posting, all the kind of things you do, free content, links to the podcast. I see your Facebook post. Here's the new episode out. You do that on
Yep.
all the different channels. I was doing all that. I was sending out a monthly, email to everybody with this is what's going on. This is my new thing, whatever. And then I had that business partner friend, and he was looking at like how much time I spent making all of these posts and all of this content for social media. And he said, I don't think that this is doing anything for you. By that time, I had the podcast was kind of roaring a little bit more. And you were saying, oh, everybody was listening to the podcast. And that was what his contention was. He said, people are listening to the podcast and telling their friends about it. Nobody's even, and these posts are sometimes making people not go to your website. So basically, what he said was, we need to turn off all of the spigots so we know what's coming in from where. So, first, we just stopped doing any social media posts about the podcast and we watched the download numbers to see if they changed. And they didn't. He proved it to me because I was panicking. I was like, we got to do this.
Yeah.
Everybody, you have to do the social media. And he proved it to me. So we stopped posting on social media, no change in download numbers. And then eventually, what we saw was an increase in email subscribers on the website and sales. So
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
weren't finding me on social media, or if they were, it was just bringing them to the website where we wanted them to be. So again, for me, at a certain point, the internet kind of turned. And even more recently, I would say it's just gotten smaller. Like the internet
Yep.
feels like it's gotten smaller than it used to be. And I think I might have mentioned you this one other time. It's sort of like it's like a public service announcement about bots. There's a lot of bots out there because I actually have discovered, like, strangely enough, bots subscribing to my email list, which I can't imagine why. Why would there be bots subscribing to some random yoga teacher's email list? The only thing I can think of is, MailChimp got sold to Intuit, which is a huge
Yep.
megacorp, and it wouldn't surprise me if somebody had some kind of, bots running to try to rack up people's subscribers, because once that happens, they pay more. If you weren't monitoring it, like I had to like create a workaround to prevent me from ending up having to pay more because of it. And I interacted with the customer service people, like, and they were all like
I was gonna ask.
tech support, customer service, clearly like in a different country. And the first two people gave me completely nothing answers. And then, strangely enough, a human being peeked through the matrix. And this woman, clearly a woman, said to me, here's a workaround. And she showed me how you can create this automatic flow that if it comes through this one embed form, which is where it was coming, it can funnel it and not count towards your subscriber count. But to
Yeah.
me, it was somebody acknowledging that this is a legit issue and giving me a workaround about how to fix it so that I don't have to keep deleting them. And to me, it's just an example of how, wow, the internet just like it's just not real anymore. It's like, so I'm a little bit more distrustful of it. Like I want to make it clean. Like somebody subscribing to my live stream classes and then showing up to a Zoom meeting and doing yoga with me is one thing. But me interacting with ChatGPT to brainstorm my ideas for my yoga teaching, I don't know. I'm not there. I'm not, I don't need, I want to keep it analog. Here's what I will say. Here's what I will say. I could make a case that if you had like, if I was smart, which I'm maybe not always, I could use ChatGPT. I could funnel my podcast episodes and say, hey, write me more detailed liner notes. Or I could get it to give me some bullet points around what I could use it for preparatory purposes. And I'm not gonna rule that out.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there's a point at which there's a kind of creative process, a creative, intuitive process that one goes through. And then there's just like an administrative, just like putting stuff into your computer so you can keep track of it or whatever. And I guess I want to find the boundary between those. I want to set the boundary
Yeah.
between those. If that makes sense.
Okay. I would, and I'll say this. I would never, but I don't need to. Again, I've had a lot of experience in the shop. I don't need to use ChatGPT to springboard how I'm teaching. However, one of the things that you said earlier that I want to pull out is there's this idea of you were like, we're staring out the window, we've got a cup of tea, we're playing on our mats to see how it is. Because, yes, that's exactly what I did when I was trying to figure out what I was going to teach when I was coming up. But I think the newer kids coming out, and I shouldn't call them kids, but the newer people in the industry that are coming up, they were never given space or permission to know how to do that. We learned how to do that because there was no one to ask. Like, who are you going to ask about how to like teach a class? You know what I mean? Like, there was no one to tell me. Like, I could have talked to my original teacher and she would have been like, I don't know, I just start talking. And then that would have been the end of the conversation.
I remember going to the library because I wanted to learn about what the Sri
Yes.
Yantra was. And the
Yeah.
librarian sent me to some microfiche where I read about what the Sri Yantra was. So
Yeah.
you just didn't have the same sources for information. I get what you're
Yeah.
saying. But I don't know. Again, like the point being that having like a really beefy search engine or something that can like provide you with that kind of like information, that to me isn't the work of being a yoga teacher. I don't know, like to that to me that's like that
Yeah.
where it comes into play is that over the years, because the world has become a digital world, being a yoga teacher has become a lot of other things. Like I'm like a
Yeah.
multimedia production
Agreed.
company, basically. And
Yeah.
I've used those skills in other for other things, like for my neighborhood association and stuff. Like I'm the like tech guy for the neighborhood association because I know how to do all this stuff. Because being a
Yeah.
yoga teacher, if you didn't have like a team, like you weren't one of the celebrity yoga teachers who made enough money to have a team of people doing stuff for you, you had to self-educate. And I learned how to
Yeah.
program HTML websites and WordPress
Yes.
websites and learn how to like shoot with the high def cameras, like you figure stuff out because you have
Yeah.
to. And the technology enabled us. That's the thing. I couldn't have done any of the things I've done if it wasn't for the
Yeah.
technological advancement.
Yeah.
I guess we just hit a
Complicated.
point. We've hit like a point of diminishing marginal utility or whatever, like where
Yeah.
the tech at some point isn't helping. It's like the efficiency of that teacher being able to ask that chat GBT undermines a process that they would have to go through if they didn't or they couldn't.
Yeah. Okay. I actually really agree with you on that.
Yeah.
like, like almost begrudgingly so,
Yeah.
because I think you're actually incredibly correct. But I do think you'd reference like a glorified search engine. Let me tell you what I use ChatGPT for. So, like, one of the things that I've noticed recently, and I think the yoga space has noticed, especially if you own a studio, is that it's like it's hard going out there, especially if you're selling yoga to individuals. Yoga is inherently expensive. It's not like a $5 cup of coffee. It's like your studio $15 to drop in, at my studio 22 to drop in. So I thought I'm going to go after corporate money. If there's any group that I know has money, it's corporations. And I personally have like a bent towards labor rights. This is unsurprising, right? My podcast is called Working in Yoga. And the government, we're discussing this in early March, and the government is looking to shut down on March 14th. Most of my government employees, because about 25% of my studio is government people, they're like, oh, we're not going to have jobs in a couple weeks. My policy is to open my doors for free to everybody who's furloughed or on strike anytime that happens in my area. Everybody just comes to yoga for free. Like, that sucks to be unemployed. Come
Hmm.
take a class. And I went, I want to get sponsored this time. I want some other corporation to pay me to be able to do this for them. So I said to ChatGPT, give me 10 leads in my area, tell me who I should contact, and give me a sample pitch. Like, I'm not going to use ChatGPT's sample pitch. I'm a better writer than ChatGPT is, but I can get oh, you've given me the main points. Like, that's wildly useful to me.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with teaching yoga. That's fundraising.
Right.
So you're
Yeah.
using it to do research to help you with a fundraising effort.
Totally. Yeah.
Great application. And I think you're right. But I think you're also right that you got to then put a human element on it, because when I get
Yeah.
emails from people wanting to come on the show, but they're clearly written by AI, you can tell when they're written by AI. I get a lot of them.
Happen?
Oh, yeah, it happens because it's so stock. Like they're not very sophisticated though
Oh,
sometimes when they're using them. But
yeah.
so yeah, I guess again, I don't think that that's a great idea. Like for instance, I have an email template out that's just like an email to all the local like psychiatrists and psychotherapists who might be interested in the kind of yoga that I do that I think is in line with a lot of different kinds of mental health practices, to kind
Yeah.
of just send an introductory note to them. So if I could get like a master list of all of them around, that would be great. That would be super helpful. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. Again, like I can imagine instances, but I don't consider that part of like that's a separate hat from my like yoga teacher hat. That's a me trying to do a thing maybe as a yoga teacher, but it's not teaching. It's not developing my
Yeah.
class. It's
Fair.
not the process of engaging with my breath and body and sharing in that with other people and all the other things that we
Yeah.
do. That was why we got into yoga in the first place. So again, I'm not against it, but that is an application that's not specific to yoga. That's just trying to kind of like raise some money. Now, there's pros and cons to raising money to make things happen like that. Like I always think of
Yeah.
that one show about the advertising where they had the lucky strike client. You have one big client who gives you all the money and then you're totally relying on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I said, like again, but still it's great if you can get funded for a thing and it has a clear kind of goal and maybe
Yeah.
an end point to it also. So it's not a
Yeah.
forever having to go out there and get the money thing. Sure. I don't know. I guess
Right.
personally, I'm trying to find a better relationship to what some people seem to think is a foregone conclusion about the future of what's going to happen in our lives and our relationship to technology. I feel like at some point, I'm going to draw a line. Like, I'm not getting the chip. If you have to have the chip to be in the society, I'm not getting the chip.
Yeah.
And people sort of shake their heads, but like people have been talking about the progression of this and technology and then the next move towards central bank digital currencies and stuff, and all of it ties in. So in a way, I see yoga, like when I first got into it, it was a countercultural move. It was like in the
Yep.
margins. It was the thing that you did that nobody even knew what it was. And it stood for something. Like for me, I've always thought of yoga as standing for kind of a signifier in society about like the essential aspects of our humanity and don't lie, back to the
Yeah.
essential principles in religions and the kind of core universal experience of being alive and whatnot. And in a way, some of the direction that the technology seems to be going seems to be pulling people away from that. So in a way, that's where I feel like it becomes at odds with yoga.
Yeah. Do you feel like we can ever build a good relationship with it? Here's what I'm thinking. Like, so our online folks, the big names in the online space, Sadie Nardini was one, Yoga with Adrian is another, but like the big names in the online yoga space, there's no reason why I can't go into Chat GPT today and say, look at every single video that Sadie Nardini and Yoga with Adrian have done in the last 5 years, build a fake person with a fake voice, and build me a YouTube channel doing yoga sequence videos that are like these two popular yoga teachers, right? There's no, like, we have the tech for that today. And I think, and I said this on the podcast when I was with you, the first thing I would do is run ads to people who are watching those to come in person to my yoga studio, because I do think while there's a usefulness to introducing concepts of yoga to folks, I think that you cap out of like quicker than I think we give it credit for. I don't think people are watching online yoga without exploring in-person yoga for all that long. I think they know it's different.
I mean, I think that there's certainly truth to what you're saying there. And I mean, I don't think that the technology's quite there yet. I do think like Adrian's gonna still have one up on the AI generation, whether they're still like not that as good yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But I would also say, and I don't know this to be true because people don't often open their books and share stuff, but like I think everybody's numbers are down. I think
For
you
sure.
can see Kino pivot to less promotion of the online stuff and more promotion to the in-person stuff at the Miami Life Center that she's got. Like, I
Yeah.
think that even for Adrian and Sadie, who's not done much online in a long while, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know that it is as thriving to do online yoga content as it used to be. And honestly, where it is working, and I'm an example of this, is people still want like authentic connections. People want to feel in relationship. And
Yeah.
my do but my podcast and the way that I do it. And part of that's the reason why I'm trying to tear down. It's sort of like to me, podcasting is kind of like this coup in the digital world. If like
Yeah.
it's old radio on the internet or something, And
Ooh, I
and
like
to
that.
me, I feel like I have purposefully trying to be very transparent and talking away on the podcast so that I am sharing of myself and so that people could connect with that if they wanted to. And I think that's why then people will go and do an online thing for that reason. Or more often than not, it's always been word of mouth. It's always been, I did this great online course. Here it is. Um,
Yeah.
So again, I don't know. I had that woman on, Emily Smith, who's like does yoga versity on, and she's got like an online platform. And
Yeah.
she's got like a roster, Kino and Bernie Clark and like all these kind of like very, well-regarded, well-known teachers working with her because I think she seems really great. She seems like she does it in a really honorable way. She knows what she's
Yeah.
doing. But what she is doing is this very curated kind of criterion collection of teachers and it's a mix of on-demand stuff like just pre-recorded videos, really well-made pre-recorded videos, and then like office hours Zoom meetings that you can go into if you want to talk to people and like ask questions. And that to me is kind of the sort of what feels like where people are landing me too in the
Yeah.
online space. But I think a lot of us are seeing if we can make some things happen offline in ways that I wasn't in the last few years. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people's focus, mine included, certainly keep nurturing what we have online because there's good stuff there, but I'm not like out there trying to figure out ways to like grow my online platform because I don't really know how to do that anymore. I don't know what you would try to do that
Yeah.
is such grouchy, like not yoga, anything I want to have to do. Like it's certain kind of online marketing stuff. It's a
Yeah.
drag.
Drag, and it's hard to get your voice out there. I mean, and you were talking about how the internet has shifted and changed, and algorithms are constantly changing. I feel like you'll appreciate when I let my son, my oldest, get social media. If he wanted social media, I said you can pick one, and you have to write me a 5-page paper about how algorithms work, so that you know how you see what you're seeing. Like, I don't want that to be an accident. I want you to have, because we do have some choice in how we interact with tech.
Hmm.
But you have to know how it works. Like, we should all know how it works. And I think it's harder and harder to figure out in the online space how it works, how to market, how to get your voice heard. Like, that's exhausting.
It is. And I think there used to be kind of clear examples. There were things that
Yeah.
were working, and you could model what you were doing on what someone else was doing, and it would work. There was like,
Yeah.
but I don't think anybody knows what's working anymore. I see people just like throwing spaghetti at the walls. I see teachers who, for a long while, sort of swore off like me, like doing online content of them doing poses or like doing asana practice in selfie
Yep.
videos or whatever. But I've seen some teachers out there doing it again who like gone back to doing it. They're doing it differently than they were before. It's not always flashy and trying to be impressive in that way, but still it's sort of like people kind of going back to what they've done in the past and seeing if it'll work now. But I don't know. I don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't see the same kind of whatever growth or whatnot happening, you know?
Great irony is that just in the last couple of years, the Yoga Alliance changed their standards for how we train, that it can all be online and asynchronous, which I find insane. I tried to get the gal who owns my vinyasa practice on the podcast. She was this close to saying yes and then didn't come. But I was like,
Okay.
I just want to talk to you about how you perceive this to work, right? Because are you, is that the same?
Well, I mean, it's interesting you point that out because I am registered as a whatever it is, YACEP. So I do
Yeah,
have
same.
people use my online stuff for continuing education credits. But the kind of amount of like sort of ideas that people have about what what the system is that they're part of, it's it's kind of incredible. And I often have had to explain to people like, well, this whole like contact hours and non-contact hours things, it kind of like, I don't know, it sort of evaporated during the pandemic and it's not clear anymore. And part of it, just to steel man it, I can see like there are some things that you can do online that are just as good. Like
Oh, yeah.
I have people in a teacher training program that I do online who also live about 30 minutes from here. So sometimes they're coming into class and sometimes they've like sat here next to me with me while I do the Zoom meeting with the people who are in, Australia and the UK or whatever. But
Yeah.
sometimes they're like, I'm going to go home so I can be cuddly on my couch and it's fine. I can't say it's
Yeah.
any better to have a conversation about the sutras sitting next to me here while I do the Zoom meeting or being
Yeah.
at home with a blanket and doing it with me, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's complicated. I really want somebody to take over our training. I feel like I've said this to you before, but like, I want just like, can we just have like neutral people really dive into training so that it's not nonsense anymore? I just want someone out
I
there to
don't
do
know.
that for us.
I don't know. I think that you had a guest on recently, and I'm forgetting all the names of your guests, forgive me, but I'm
Yeah.
terrible with names. But he was talking about how like yoga organizations should be about yoga and not about like yoga business or
Baby.
yoga industry, right?
Yeah.
And I was in complete agreement. But then he was like, but we got to regulate it. And I'm like, no, that's the problem. Like, I feel like it would be interesting if I were to imagine a possibility rather than just like critique everything that's wrong. If we can kind of be more proactive and imagine a possibility that there would be some kind of organization or some kind of thing that people would come around where it really was about yoga and not about yoga business,
Yeah.
um, then I don't know. I just don't think it. I don't think it would matter. We should like if we got out of the game of credentialing, like if we just got out of it, if we just didn't concern ourselves with trying to credential teachers or like cert register programs, and we just had it be like a resource, a learning resource and community gathering entity. I mean, that's what would be good because it always goes awry when it tries to become the yoga police. Because one way or another, somebody's got to decide what the rules are or what the objective metrics are for competency or whatever it is, and it's always been an issue. So I don't know. To me, I've kind of like I don't know. I was looking at the Yoga Alliance website the other day and I was looking at its audit. You know, they put out their annual audits and I was just shocked. Like it's so much money. Like
So much
overall
money.
assets of like $24 million.
Yeah.
And
That they're
just like
doing nothing with. They're just
it's
sitting on it.
insane. And they have this $14 million investment portfolio. And just like they collect between 8 and $10 million in fees and memberships every year. It's
Yes.
crazy that amount of money.
And we are all so poor.
It's insane. And
It is
so to me,
insane.
like when I look at that and then we say, oh, well, let's use AI. I'm like, no, that's not. Like I just feel because like, I don't know, it connects to me that there was something about, I don't know, maybe I am just a Gen Xer who's like,
Yeah,
old,
maybe.
but I feel like I want to hold tight to some things that are important. And in terms of like yoga, one of the things that went sour with it was sort of the way that it became kind of competitive or whatever, or like certain aspects of business color it. And
Yeah.
I think you talked about this when you're on my show. I think there's ways to do business that are in line with your yogic beliefs. And I'm not saying we shouldn't make a living and be smart and discerning and whatnot, but I don't know. It almost feels like, and this is what those books I mentioned earlier were a lot about, is that you want to be the one who's deciding what to do with the technology or what, rather than it kind of guiding, giving over to
Yeah.
it or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know, with the trade organizations, it just has always felt like it never, I don't know, the existing thing feels sort of irreparable. And, who's got the energy? Who's going to
Mean.
take it on to try to create the new thing?
You can do it.
No, not me. You're the one with the Facebook group.
Well,
This Facebook group.
I don't have enough money to do that. I mean, like, sometimes I look at it, I'm just like, you've made this mess. And actually, I think the orgs should be the most worried about tech and AI out of any of us, because if we keep whittling down the people who are doing this job, which I think is what's going to happen again, like the current administration, the US government, for example, I think it's going to make it even harder for us to maintain our jobs because we don't get paid a lot. It's going to be difficult for us to make livings when people don't have a lot of extra expendable income. So we're going to burn again a little bit the way we burned in 2020. And, everybody was kind of half in, went, well, I'm out now because it's harder.
Mhm.
And then if tech comes in to take our place to some degree, which if tech can give us a basic meditation, basic stretching, and some affirmations, that's sometimes all people need.
I mean, I will say this. Someone I really like was just mentioning to me, we were having a conversation about meditation in your personal practice, and he was talking about using, I think it was like Eddie Stern's breathing app.
Oh, yeah.
And he likes it. And he told me about it. And I mean, like, I got it. I got like he was using it. But I also did make the case for him that like setting the phone down and not having the phone around is a thing, is a
Yeah.
thing too.
Yeah. Yes, you exist outside that space. We exist outside that experience we have with tech. Yes.
So I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't want to take anything away from somebody that's helping them. You know what I mean? I'm not
Yeah.
trying to like
Yeah.
impose my idea on anybody else, but I'm just observing that I have to find reasons to have things in my life that mean I'm not on a screen for periods of time.
Yeah.
I have been baking for the last year and a half. Totally out of nowhere. I just
Nice.
bake all kinds of things now. I make all the bread that our family eats and I make all the sweets that we eat because it's time that I spend not on a screen.
Yeah.
Just making
I,
things that my family eats and is nourishing, and I know what the ingredients are, and I pray and I put my heart in it, and it's like a thing. And I would have never imagined that I would ever do such a thing, but it's specifically because I just felt like I'm creating on the screen, like I'm writing on the screen and doing stuff.
yeah.
I'm on my screen right now. I'm doing podcasts. I'm on my screen when I'm teaching my yoga classes, although now I specifically have classes where I'm not on screen too. But I just, at
Yeah.
some point, I just felt like, oh my gosh, too much of my time in my day exists with a screen in front of my eyes. And there was a moment in the years past, I talked about it on the podcast, where I was trying to do, I read someone would have like a digital Sabbath, where you'd have one
Yeah.
day a week at least, where you woke up and then you went to sleep without ever looking at a screen. And I did it for a little bit. I had one day a week where I did it. It was hard. You have to be so disciplined. You have
Yeah.
to be so disciplined to do it. But just to think, I had a whole chunk of my life that that was the case. Although we did have TVs, in all honesty, we had TVs and those
Yeah.
counts as screens. But still, I feel like that's what I mean. Like to me, there's almost something really powerful now because it's so
Mhm.
ubiquitous. Yoga to me kind of signifies time where I'm not on the screen. And again, I am sometimes on screen even while I'm doing yoga too, but I'm looking to bring the spirit of that with me, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I feel like it's very lovely that you bake because I too am also looking for those things like where I'm disconnected. I want to have things where no one can reach me.
Mm,
Like that's very important to me. Like I raised two kids and like there has to be moments where I only exist because I exist, not because I exist to be of service to anyone else. And I love to be of service, but I think it's important that we exist and what we do for ourselves, and that feels like baking is that thing that you exist and do just because it's a thing. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. Again, I've in my own yoga practice, and you're looking to be a facilitator for others to kind of recognize their own patterns and maybe develop healthy patterns that help you feel more the
Yeah.
way you want to feel in your life and be who you want to be. And so, in applying that to myself, which you have to do if you want to be legit about helping other
Yes.
people to do it, right? You're basically
Yeah.
using whatever tools you're using for other people. You have to have kind of used them for yourself first. And in using those tools, what it's telling me is, Jay, you got to eat less sugar and you got to be off the screen less.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do I do that and still, have nurture the things that I need to nurture with my online stuff? But how do I forge in-person things, which is way harder now than it has ever been,
Yeah.
but feels really important too.
This has been such a good conversation.
Super fun, super fun.
Jay, can you tell everybody where they can find you and like follow you around? I'm not on the internet, just one spot, a website, right?
That's true. Everything can be found at jbrownyoga.com. You can find all the online video stuff, the podcast stuff, everything's there at jbrownyoga.com. And people can get on the free email list too if they don't want to buy anything, just to
Yeah.
keep in touch.
Great. Thank you so much. This was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Real pleasure.
Thank you so much for this talk, Jay. Here are our key takeaways. First, I do think we need to pay homage to some of the old ways, even as we adapt to new tech. When yoga's industry sort of came of age in the 90s, we were definitely using things like Kleenex boxes and old shoe boxes and cigar boxes to store our money, and you just tossed it in the box and off you went into class. And there's something very sweet and lovely about that model, even if some of the something to that model was some yoga studios at that time were evading taxes. We certainly are running our businesses today in a significantly more amount of tech than we ever did in the past. So I also feel a bit of nostalgia for those days too. I remember walking up like the 50 stairs in a 200-year-old building to get to class, where I wrote my name on a sign-in sheet that also kind of served as a waiver. But look at us today. We've come a long way, and I'm really proud of us. Next, interactive engagement with other humans matters. It also improves our skill sets in yoga teaching and teaches us how to skillfully navigate humans of all kinds. Since the majority of us in our businesses are one-man shows, tech, though, can help us do things like lead capture and navigate competition against major corporations who run chain studios like Yoga 6 or Core Power. So let's take that into consideration when thinking about how we use tech in our businesses. Next, one of the best points here is that if you use tech or not, there needs to be boundaries around it. Are you using it to help fundraise like I did? Or are you using it to replace the discomfort of not being proficient at a thing? What your intentions are for tech and AI use is a really great, deeper inquiry from this episode. Next, the struggle matters for professional experience. Oh my God, I could not agree with this thought that Jay has more. Truly, that initial struggle is so useful for developing proficiency as a teacher. You'll hear in an interview in this series with Justin D'Angelo, who talks a lot about how he uses tech as a springboard for ideas, like a conversation starter, so to speak. But it's up to us to interpret the ideas and develop them as human beings. And in this process, sometimes a little bit of discomfort really is necessary. Next, turning off all the spigots is such good business advice. Stop all the flow for a sec and then turn each stream on one by one until you figure out what makes an actual difference, and do a whole lot more of that in your business. Next, this is another great question that Jay talked about on the podcast. Is there a point of diminishing return for AI and tech in the yoga space? At what point is the tech that once helped us now hindering us or not as beneficial as it once was? This is a great add-on question to our AI and tech series discussion guide that you can find in our show notes. Do you believe that the inevitable progression of AI and tech is that we will need to opt in to more tracking? That was something that Jay referenced, and I'm curious about your thoughts. The tracking conversation is always an interesting one, as it seems like we're already being tracked via our cell phones for most things. Is that okay with you? Is it in antithesis to the liberation practice that we're doing in yoga spaces? And finally, there are two other industry points of inquiry for you to end this conversation. What are your thoughts on online training versus in-person training? At least one organization has decided that all online asynchronous training has the same weight as all in-person trainings. Do you agree with this? Is there nuance here? If you want to hear more about this discussion, Kimberly Searle is coming on the podcast in the series to talk about just that. And this also begs the follow-up question, should our organizations or governing bodies have industry standards and guidelines for how we use AI and tech in our industry? Or is this just something we all need to figure out for ourselves? Now, I want to thank you so much, Jay Brown, again for this conversation, and go back and check out my interview on his podcast from the show notes. Now, let's get back to work, my friends. I will catch you around the water cooler next time.